Good morning, everybody. We are on Ayin Aleph 71a, and we pick up at Ika Lahad Rav Huna, which is the fourth line from the top. So some Ika Lahad Rav Huna, some have a different version of what Rav Huna just said, which we'll now obviously review. Ahad Tani Rabbi Yosef, in reference to the brisa taught by Rav Yosef. The pasuk we discussed was if you lend my people money to the poor, ami v'nachri, ami kadem. If and you'll recognize this from the laws of tzedakah. I think it's very similar. If you need to, if you have the opportunity to loan a Jew or a non-Jew, ami kodem, you should give precedence to your own people. Ani v'yasher, if you have to lend money to either a poor person or a rich person, ani kodem, you should lend the poor person. Ani yechav ani ircha. If you have poor people from your city or from your family or your own poor people, which we take to mean family, perhaps friends, or other people in the city who you possibly do not know. Aniyecha kod mean first deal with the people who are your own people. Aniyecha kod mean if you have to choose between lending money to poor people in your city or in another city, choose your city. Amar, so we said, Ami v'nachri, Ami kadem, you should first lend to your own people, to Jewish people. Pshita, obviously. Why, what would that's not very surprising. Amar Rav Nachman Amar Li Huna. So Rav Nachman says that Rav Huna told me Lo Nisracha Tafil L'Nachri B'Ribi Sili Yisrael B'Chinam. The reason that it's telling you that, the Rice is telling you that, is even if you're taking a loss or foregoing the opportunity for profit, because you could lend money to the non-Jew with interest, but you can't take interest from the Jew. Even so, you should still first loan to Jews. Tanya, we have a brisa. Amar Rav Yossi. Some use enam shall malve beribis, the blindness of people who some use enam shall malve beribis. See how blind people are who lend with interest. Adam kori l'chavero rasha, yoredim l'chayav. If you call somebody a rasha, then he's gonna get involved with you. In other words, he's gonna harass you for that. He's going to be upset and make yourself be difficult with you. But Haim. Mavin Edim Velavlar, and if you're people who lend money with interest, they go so far as to bring witnesses and a scribe, studio, and you have to have a pen and ink. The chosvin has to be written and signed. Ploni zeh kafar be'elahei Yisrael. And what's written in this contract? That you're not keeping the mitzvahs, right? You're denying God's commandments. So, in other words, you're calling yourself a rasha, right? And yet, and you're blind to what you're doing. So see how blind people are to their own actions. Tanya, we have another brayso. Rabbi Shimon ben Elazar Omer, Kol mi sheish lo mos, if you have money, umal v'osam shelo beribis, and you lend them without interest, olav v'kosav Omer, kaspa lo nasam b'nashach v'shochad al naki lo lakach. Pasuk says in Tehillim, I believe, a person who didn't, praiseworthy person who doesn't give his money with interest and doesn't take bribes, also ela liyimot liolam, someone who does this will never falter. Halamata, so you see, shekal malva baribis nechasav mismotatim. If you do lend with interest, then this bracha of lo yimot, that you're not going to falter, will not come true, right? So you will falter. You will eventually lose money. The Gemara says, but we see people who don't lend with interest, who lend without interest, become mismotatin, but they don't do so well in business. Like, how do you square this with reality? Halalu mismotatin ve'olin, halalu mismotatin ve'enon. Sure, there's fluctuations, right? You see somebody losing money, even though he's an erlich yid, and he lends money without interest. So yeah, sometimes he's going to lose money, but he's being promised eventually, long term he's going to do well. So if you see somebody losing money, it's not the end of the story. He could still do well. Not a great answer. But that's what it is. Lama Savit Bogdim Tachrish Bevala Rasha Tzadik Mimanu. The pasuk says, "Why do you watch those traitors, and you're quiet when wicked people swallows up the tzaddik?" Amar of Huna Tzadik Mimanu Bolea. A rasha can actually tzaddik mimenu bolea. You can swallow somebody who's more of a tzaddik than you. Tzaddik gomer ain't a bolea. But someone who's truly, objectively a tzaddik, you can't swallow. A rasha can't swallow. So it's a question of relative versus absolute. And you see that. I think so. There's several examples in the Torah. The one that comes to mind is Noach, right? Noach ish tzaddik tamim haya b'dorosav. So the commentaries dispute, was he only relatively a tzaddik, or was he a true tzaddik? So this idea is being presented here again. I don't know how to square it with reality, but or what appears to be reality, that that a true tzaddik cannot be swallowed up, as it were, by a rasha. Okay, but if you see someone who is a rasha who is taking advantage of someone who is more righteous than he, that could happen. Tanya, you have a brisa. Rabbi Omer, Ger Tzedek Amar L'Inyan Mechira, a ger, a convert who is, that the Torah talks about regarding being sold as a slave, an eved ivri. V'ger Toshav ha'amor le'inyan ribis. And so you what the Torah says is you cannot, a ger tzedek, a convert, cannot be sold as a slave. And a ger toshav hamar linyan ribis, and there's this ger toshav, this resident alien, that that you can't lend to with interest. And mahi, I don't know what are these terms exactly, ger and ger tzedek and ger toshav. What are these cases we're talking about? So a convert who, regarding being sold as a servant, if your brother becomes poor and he gets sold to you, that's the eved ivri. V'lo l'cha elo l'ger. So this Bryce is saying he can be sold not only to you but also to a ger. Shenemar l'ger. As it says later, you can be sold to a ger. Below leger tzedek, and not only a convert, elo leger toshav, even the ger toshav, shenamar leger toshav, as the pasuk goes on to say. V'nimkar, what's the actual pasuk? I have it over here on the side. V'chis tasig yad ger v'toshav imach umach achicha imo v'nimkar l'ger toshav imach oleker mishpachas ger. So that the pasuk is leger toshav. You can be sold to a ger toshav or mishpachas ger, the family of a ger. That's talking about a non-Jew. Kishu omer ola eker. It says la'aker mishpachas ger. The aker, best translated as an idol, some kind of avodah zara. That's being sold to, like, the temple of avodah zara.
Well, what is it when he's talking about selling a ger tzedek and not selling? The Torah says that one, in certain situations, one can sell himself as an eved, right? He can an eved.
Right.
So this ger tzedek is an ivri because he converted already. So what's the distinction? What's the difference between whether he was a ger or not ger? At this point he's a Jew. So what's the point it's trying to make here? Just consider that he's a Jew and that he can sell himself as an eved in certain situations. I mean, not going into all of those, but so what's the point that he has to say that it's a ger tzedek that can be sold or not sold? He's a Jew, and that's, I mean, what are we learning from this?
So as we will see as we go on, so hold that thought. But as we will see, there are restrictions on As we'll see, you have to have, like, part of the thing of being an Eved is you have to be freed and go back to your family, right? V'shavel mishpachto, you go back to your family, and as we'll see, a ger, um, uh, it does not have a legally speaking, a ger no longer has a family once he converts. Um, so um, so there are restrictions, even though, as you say, the person is in almost all other respects fully Jewish once he or she converts. There can be some differences regarding becoming an Evan. So it's a good question, but that's the case here. So Amar Mar. So we said v'lo lecha el leger, not only to you, but you can even become an eved to a ger. Shnemar leger, lememar the ger kani eved ivri. So you're saying that a ger can acquire an eved ivri, a Hebrew, a Jewish slave. Raminu ein a ger nikna be'eved ivri. We have a brisa that addresses exactly what you're saying. A ger cannot be. You can't buy a ger as a Hebrew as an eved ivri. Ve'nisha a ger kani eved ivri. Nor can a woman or a ger buy an eved ivri. Why not? Ger lo nitna be'eved ivri v'shavel mishpachto bina. A ger cannot be sold as a slave because of the requirements of the shavel mishpachto, that he has to be able to return to his family at the end of the term. But he doesn't have a family because legally, because a ger kekaton shenoladame is what the Gemara says, is like he's like a newborn. In other words, once you're converted, you're like a newborn person, right? You don't have that legal tie in halacha anyway to your non-Jewish family. So the Anisha beger konin eved ivri, and a woman or a ger cannot buy an eved ivri. Isha, why not a woman? Lavar chara, because it's not. It doesn't look good, right? It's not the way. It's not a proper way to behave. In other words, I think that the concern here is that if you have a woman, especially one who perhaps is unmarried, and she has a male slave, there's the possibility or the suspicion of sexual impropriety. And ger name, and why can't the ger buy eved ivri? Gemira, because we have a tradition to mikne kane of the lo mikne lo kane, because it's the mirror image. It's like if the one who can become a slave can buy a slave, one who cannot become a slave, like a ger, cannot buy a slave. Um, so so this shows us that a ger can't buy a eved ivri. So now how do you explain the pasuk we said before that it appears that a ger is part of this whole situation of eved ivri? Amar Nachum bar Yitzchak.
So what, a ger can't buy the ger? I want to say that again. The ger can't buy another
A
ger.
ger can this brisa says a ger cannot become an eved ivri, and therefore reciprocally he cannot buy an eved ivri. It's like a two-step thing, right? He can't become an eved ivri because he doesn't have the shavel mishpachto, and only one who can become an eved ivri can buy another eved ivri. So that's why he can't buy one either. So Amar of Nachman bar Yitzchak, or Nachman answers, Eino kone v'dino ki Yisrael. It means that a ger can't he can't buy an eved ivri in the same way as as a non-ger can do. Avol kone v'dino kanachri, but he can buy an eved ivri. Just there are different rules for born Jews and converts who buy an eved ivri. How so? The Tanya, we have the brisa about it, of course. Hanirtza, an eved ivri who has his wants to stay on after the 7 years and he has his ear pierced. V'hanimkar l'nachri, or someone who is sold to a non-Jew. Eno oved lo sabein v'lo sabas. If the master dies, the slave is not part of the estate. Whereas Whereas in general, if a born Jew has an Eved Ivri and he dies, then and the owner dies, then the estate does inherit. So there is so Rav Nachman is explaining that yes, a ger can own an Eved Ivri, and that's what the Torah is talking about. And what our Brisa was talking about is that the rules are a little different in that can't become part of the estate.
So he
Okay.
can buy a ger can buy an Eved Ivri then,
Yes, that is the conclusion.
but the only difference is that he's not inherited.
Correct. Whereas the Eved Ivri of a born Jew can be passed on as an inheritance, subject to all the other rules. Still have the 7 years, the Yovel, etc.
Hmm.
Amar, we said before, ve'ein isha v'ger konin Eved Ivri, that a woman or a ger cannot buy an Eved Ivri. Nema d'lo Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. Maybe this is against Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, the Tanya. We have a brisa. Isha konas hashvachos ve'ena konas avadim. A woman can buy female servants but not male. Rav Shimon Gamliel omer af konas avadim. Rav Shimon Gamliel says no distinction. A woman can also buy male servants. So it appears that Rabbi Shimon Gamliel is arguing on our brisa, right? Because our brisa says a woman cannot buy an Eved Ivri. So my answer is afilu tem Rabbi Shimon Gamliel. You can resolve it. V'lo kasha kan be'eved Ivri, kan be'eved Kanani. No, what Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, when he says a woman can own an Eved, it means an Eved Kanani, not an Eved Ivri. Eved Ivri tzniela. Why would that be a difference? I mean, if the problem is that you're afraid about, the woman being, in such close contact and also in a master slave relationship with this man. So what's the difference if he's Jewish or not? Eved Ivri
Exactly.
tzniela. Because people consider an Eved Ivri like he's Jewish, so she would presumably treat him with more, be more circumspect about how she interacts with him. But Eved Kanani parsley. But if he's not Jewish, then she would. Rabbi Shimon Gamliel thinks that she would treat him more as a, more objectified, perhaps, and maybe there's more of a chance or likelihood for impropriety. Elahadatan Rabbi Yosef, but what about what Rabbi Yosef said? Our Malta lo turabe kalba. A widow shouldn't raise a dog, shouldn't keep a dog. Volotashri bar rav bushbiza, and should not host, provide accommodations for a student in the yeshiva. Again, for the reasons of a possible sexual impropriety. So Bishlama Barbe Rab. Okay, so I understand why don't host a student at Tzniela because one second, you
But it's
can,
not sneered. It's not sneered.
yeah. Yeah, right, because it's a case where tzniut is not being observed here. Ela kalba, but a dog, kevin de misrachba, like oh no, so what it's saying is tzniela, like he's going to treat her discreetly, like they're going to cover it up, right? Um, they're going to cover up if they have a relationship, they're going to cover it up, right? He's not going to be affectionate with her in public, let's say. Okay, but a dog, you don't have that cover up, right? If they have if she has this kind of relationship with the dog, then the dog will probably follow her around, behave in such a way that indicates that they're having this improper relationship. So Mirza, so she should be, she'd be afraid to do that with the dog, right? Because people will basically observe that something is up here. So she should be allowed to raise a dog. Like, why do we say not? No, I'm right. So the answer, Kevan de Chishad Yale Umsa, Misrach Basra. No, just because the dog is appears very devoted to hers. Maybe because she feeds him well, right? She throws it raw meat, right? So if people see the dog is inordinately attached to the woman, they wouldn't necessarily think it's because she's having a sexual affair with the dog. It's they think because she's feeding, feeding him very well. He's well trained. Amrayin Shea people will say Mishumum said the Shadule Hudamat Misrach. That's because she feeds him well. That's why the dog follows her around like that, and so she can continue. So we still suspect that she would be tempted to have this relationship with the dog in private, and no one would suspect, just like with the yeshiva boy. Okay. Now, we said before that there's an issue with a ger toshav regarding interest. So what's that about? If your brother becomes poor, and he needs help, so you should support him. Ger v'toshav, whether he's a ger or a resident, so he can live with you. But don't take interest. And fear God. So your brother may live with you. Raminus, the Gemara asks, Lovin mehanu malvinos and beribis. V'chein beger toshav. Can you charge and pay interest to not only to a non-Jew but also to a ger toshav? Amar Nachman Yitzchak miksiv al tikach meitam. Does it say don't take from him? No, meito, from him. Mi Yisrael. That's only from a Jew, and not from a not from a ger toshav who is still non-Jewish. Which is a little strange way to well, ger v'toshav, yeah. So it means that ger, a full ger, a real convert, from him you can't take interest, but the v'toshav that was included in that you should still lend the money, that is not included in the prohibition of interest. The toshav, which is a short form of ger toshav. Yeah.
He's considered like a ger in this situation. I mean, he's considered like a non-Jew. So he is a non-Jew. You can take interest from him.
That's correct. Yeah. You just have to parse the pasuk in a rather odd way to make that fit. Don't take interest. But you can become a guarantor on an interest-bearing loan. Okay. Arav Laman, so what does that mean? And what's the situation here? Who's guaranteeing what? Elam Arav Lisrael, that you're guaranteeing you're providing a guarantee to a Jewish lender, Vahatana. Elu over and below Tase, the Mishnah says these are violate a lotase, a negative commandment. Hamalva valova ha'arev ha'edim. Anybody involved in this case, the lender, the borrower, the guarantor, and the witnesses. So we must be talking about you can be a guarantor for a non-Jewish lender, right? So a non-Jew lends to a Jew, and you provide the security, right? V'chevan de dine denachri de azil basar arva. But since the Dina Danachri, the secular law, provides that Azul Basar Arva, that the lender goes directly to the guarantor, not to the borrower, to claim the debt. So, like, once I've guaranteed the loan, the lender is going to come to me to repay it. Ihu nihu de kashakil mine revisa, and then if I pay interest to the non-Jewish lender, and then I go to claim the loan, the debt from the guy who borrowed it, who's Jewish, right? So presumably I'm taking not only the principal but the interest from him, right? Because that's what I had to pay to the non-Jewish lender. Ella, one second. Rav Shesha's answers, Shekibel alav ladun b'dinei Yisrael. No, we're not talking about a case where the non-Jewish lender is going to come to you, the guarantor. He's agreed that he's going to go directly to the borrower, and you only have to get involved if the borrower can't pay. So that way the interest is being paid directly from the borrower to the non-Jewish lender, and that's okay. The Gemara says, wait a minute. If you're saying that he accepted Jewish law as the basis for this loan, or adjudicating this loan, then there shouldn't be any interest because Jewish law says that there shouldn't be any interest. Now, don't be silly. It's like he accepts, the way that the loan will be repaid, but that doesn't mean he's foregoing his interest, right? He is not like accepting all Jewish laws regarding this loan, just the practice of who you're going to collect from.
So what happens in the end if the borrower can't pay and they come to the guarantor? Can the guarantor in that case not just say, I'm not going to pay the interest?
Not likely, but maybe the guarantor maybe can't collect the interest part from the borrower. According to Jewish law. That's what it would seem to me.
And the borrower is a non-Jew.
The borrower is Jewish.
Well, the borrower is Jewish.
Yeah.
So then the guarantor loses then.
Yes. That's always a risk if you're a guarantor.
But the guarantor then is willing to pay the interest himself.
Yeah, well, he's willing to pay. He's
to the non-Jew.
Look, if the guarantor can't collect the principal from the borrower either, he also takes a loss, right? That's the point of being a guarantor. You take a risk. So here he's taking the risk that the borrower won't pay the interest. But he's also taking the risk that he won't pay at all, right?
But in any case, he's paying the interest to the lender because he agreed to be the guarantor for the loan. So he himself is subjecting himself to the non-Jewish law by paying interest.
Well, Jewish law allows you to pay interest to a non-Jew anyway, right?
Okay.
Yeah,
that's right.
Now, the next part of the Mishnah, Malvi Yisrael Ma'osov Shel Nachri, you can lend out a non-Jew's money, Midas Nachri, with the consent of the non-Jew, and you can do it with interest. Tanarabana, Rabbi's taught, Malva Yisrael Ma'osov Shel Nachri Midas Nachri. You can lend money of a non-Jew with his consent, with interest, of a lo Midas Yisrael, but not with the consent of a Jewish person. What does that mean? Kate said, how is that? Yisrael shall have a Jew borrows from a non-Jew with interest. And it's time to repay the loan. So another, he's on his way, he's got the money in his pocket, and he meets another Jew and says, you know what? Give me the money and I'll pay you the interest. Like I need the money right now. Let me take the money from you, including the interest, and I'll repay the non-Jew. Also, you can't do that, okay? Because you're paying interest to the non-Jew, to the Jewish intermediary. But if you then the two of you go to the non-Jewish lender and you propose this guy is going to take over, this other Jew is going to take over my loan, mutter, then it's okay, because then he's paying the interest directly to the non-Jew. V'chein, nachri shalava mos miYisrael beribis, a non-Jew that borrows money from a Jew with interest, he's on his way to give it back. So another Jew finds the non-Jew on the way and says, give me the money and I'll take care of it. Kaderech shatam, I'm going to repay the Jew on the same terms. Muta, that's okay. But if they both go to the lender, the Jewish lender, and the non-Jew says this guy is going to take over the loan, the terms of the loan, that's not permitted, because then you as the Jew are paying directly interest to the Jew. Okay, so Bishlama say, if I understand the second case where it's the Jewish lender and non-Jewish borrower, l'chumra. So we're being more strict, right? We're saying, no, you can't do this. If you if you both are, if you all agree together. El Aresha, but the first part where the non-Jew is the lender, the non-Jew is the lender, Kevan de ein shlichus l'nachri, since we don't apply the rules of a shaliach to a non-Jew, ihu niu de kashakel minei, ribisa. So isn't it it's the first borrower taking from the second borrower? So why do we allow it? Amar Afuna bar Manoach Mishmeid Rav Acha Bered Rav Ika. When we're talking about Kedon di Amar Le Hanichem Gavi Karkavi Pater, it's when the lender, who is a non-Jew, says to they're all there together, and he says to the original borrower, put the money here on the ground. Don't give it back to me, but put it on the ground and let the other guy pick it up. Then that is the only way where you can allow this transfer of the loan. So in that case, what are you even telling us, right? It's like you're actually giving back the money and then he's lending it to this other guy. Like, what's then it becomes too obvious. Rav Papa answers as follows: Kagon, we're talking about where the money was actually returned to the non-Jewish lender, and then he gave it to the second guy. So Akatim, I remember. So still, it's very obvious, right? That's a completely separate transaction, and each one has the non-Jew as the lender. So of course, you can pay interest. Like, what's the issue here? My answer is Nachri Gufe Ki Avi that Yisrael Kogamer V'Yav. That the non-Jew, when he does this, he's just executing the intention of the first borrower, right? So you might think that it's still related to the first borrower, and it's like the second borrower is paying interest to the first borrower. So Kamash Malan, so it's telling us that that's not the case, but that's a little weak because, like, why would you think that, right? If you actually give the money back to the lender, and then he turns around and lends it to somebody else, why would you think that the first guy is still involved in the loan?
Is this the case of the lender being Jewish or non-Jewish? I'm confused here.
Non-Jewish. The lender is non-Jewish, right? So the lender lends to Reuven. Reuven gives him back the money, and he lends it to Shimon, and the lender lends it to Shimon. So of course, both cases there can be interest. Right? So I don't really understand, the Gemara's answer. That's like, you might think that since it's the same money, it's still the terms of the first loan, and it's like the second borrower is paying interest, as it were, to the first borrower. I don't really get why we would think that, but that's where the Gemara ends up.
Well, that's what we initially thought before, and Rav Papa tried to do, right? Isn't that our concern earlier with, who was that, Rav Nachman? Now Rav Papa wants to interpret differently. I don't know.
Yeah, he's trying to resolve the contradiction, right, between he well, we're trying to find a way to understand why you would think that, like, why it's okay to why is it okay for this transaction to take place, right? Where the loan is transferred from borrower, it's a non-Jewish lender, and the loan is transferred from Jewish borrower A to Jewish borrower B, right? Why is that okay? And so we're answering because it first went back to the lender and then to the borrower B. So then it's obvious, right? Obviously, that's like two separate loans, right? Why is borrower A is not involved anymore? So any interest is paid directly to the non-Jew. So that's why I don't understand, like, that the Gemara says the same, but you would have thought that that when he's accepting the money and turning around and lending it out again, that he still considers the first borrower to be involved, right? That it's he's just assuming that the second borrower is taking over the terms of the first borrower. I mean, as I discussed it, you could kind of see it. So the Gemara tells us,
In
so this
the, and
Bryson
then
tells us it's not the case. That if you return it to the lender and the lender turns around and lends it out again, it's a separate transaction, and the transaction can be with interest because the lender is a non-Jew.
that's what we
Rav
said
Ashi, however,
before. Mito ate so goy, right? If
yeah,
we met another Jew, kederek shata malelo, that would be asur. But im
right,
mito it's a goy. So it seems to be he puts it down on the ground, like we said, and then he gives it back to the goy. So
right. Well,
there's
that was one answer. Puts it down on the ground. The second answer, he gives it back
okay,
directly to the
right,
non-Jew.
right. The hamito could be interpreted both ways.
Yeah, exactly, exactly. Rav Ashi Amar is the third answer. Ki amrin shlichus nachri. When do we say that there's no the non-Jew cannot be that cannot appoint a shaliach? Hani milei betruma. That's regarding separating truma. V'l'chol Torah kula yesh shlichus nachri. It's only separating truma that you can't have a non-Jew separate your truma for you. But otherwise you can. V'had Rav Ashi barusahi. But the Gemara says Rav Ashi's view is not accepted. It's an outside view. It's like outside the pale,
The das
beyond the pale.
yachid, like you
Yeah,
said, like a das yachid.
yeah, but I think it's worse than the Das Yachid. It's like you know, it's like saying it's wrong, right? Like his view is not. The Gemara is saying that his view cannot be viewed as part of the tradition, right? If you have a Das Yachid, then then you can say, okay, so this brisa was like Rav Ashi, and the other brisa was not like Rav Ashi, or something like that, right? But if Rav Ashi his view is completely rejected, and it's not even a valid viewpoint, then you can't say that. So that's what the Gemara is saying, is that Rav Ashi's view is not a valid viewpoint. So don't tell me that you can resolve the brisa according to Rav Ashi. Everybody rejects this idea of Rav Ashi. So, and why? Why is Rav Ashi's viewpoint no good? Ma'ishna truma delo. Because why should truma be different? Atem gamatem, because it says kain tarimu gamatem, right? That you should separate truma. So maybe it's the extra word gam matem b'nei bris af shluchachem nami b'nei bris. That like just as this applies to Jews, even the shaliach has to be Jewish to separate truma. Is that what Rav Ashi says? So. So shlichus to Torah kula name be true gamrina law. Like, where do you get the whole idea that you can have a shaliach uh, in Torah law? It comes from truma. Um, the the very idea that somebody else can do something on your behalf comes from truma. Okay, so El Ravashi, Bruce, so you have to say that Ravashi makes no sense.
Why are we
Um,
concerned that the goy or a non-Cohen would eat the truma or do something with it that he's not supposed to do?
well, you could say the same thing about a Jew,
Right.
right?
Exactly.
Well,
Sure. So why would the Nachri be any different? Why is he
well,
allowed to touch the truma?
first of all, we're saying that the Nachri is not different. The Nachri can be a shaliach. You might be asking, why does Rav Ashi think it's different? He has a pasuk to base it on. But we've knocked that down. We've said that pasuk, using that pasuk makes no sense, because either you're knocking down shlichus altogether, because all shlichus derives from truma. So if you're saying there can't be non-Jewish shlichus with truma, then you're saying there can't be non-Jewish shlichus at all.
So, but with truma, why are we not concerned that that person, Jew, non-Jew, would eat the truma? Truma is designated for a Cohen.
Yeah, why? I mean, so you're questioning, why should there be shlichus at all for truma? You can
Right.
suspect anybody of that. Okay, I'm not tell you. The Torah says there can be shlichus. Ikadiyam, right? Others say this is what Rav Ashi said. I'm Rav Ashi. Ki amrin shlichus l'nachri. When we say that there's no shlichus for non-Jew, hanemile you didan. That's only a one-way thing. They can't be our shaliach, right? But what we're talking about is aval non you do have a shliach. We can be a shaliach for a non-Jew, right? So when we're talking about the case in front of us, then it's like the non-Jew is the lender, the Jew A is the borrower, and then he becomes the shaliach to give to transfer the loan to Jew B. So that's okay. But then the Gemara says, "V'hadrav Ashi Brusi." No, we reject this idea of Rav Ashi's also, that shlichus is. If that's Rav Ashi's idea, we're also rejecting that shlichus is one way. Why? Maishna iu inhuladidan delo. Because what would your theory be, Rav Ashi? That why can a non-Jew, why is he invalid as a shaliach for a Jew to receive atem gam atem? Because again, back to the pasuk about truma, right? Gam atem. It says also you can separate truma l'rabba shluchachem. Include meaning you can have a shliach matem b'nei bris, have shluchachem b'nei bris. So Rav Ashi's point would be, if you're Jewish, so the shliach also has to be Jewish. And Nami would also have to apply that the other way around. Matem b'nei bris kamar, because it says, like, just as you are b'nei bris, like the gamatem works both ways, right? So it doesn't make sense in that pasuk to say it's only one way. The pasuk clearly is applying both ways. Elahad Rav Ashi brusu. So again, we're saying Rav Ashi's view is not valid at all. And Ravina Amar. Ravina tries to resolve this as follows. Okay, so we've established that a non-Jew doesn't have shlichus. Zechia midrabanan islay, but he can acquire things according to midrabanan. He can acquire things through a shaliach midei havakatan, just like a minor can, right? So a minor doesn't have any property rights. So how can he acquire something through a shaliach? So katan lav afagav delesle shlichus, even though he can't appoint a shaliach because he hasn't reached the age of majority. Easily midrabana, but the rabbi still allowed him to use a shaliach to acquire property. And this is because the rabbis wanted to keep minors from getting cheated or from being unable to support themselves if needed. So in the case of the rule would be the same for a non-Jew, that okay, we generally don't think mina raisa, we don't think that there's agency shlichus for a nachri. However, the rabbis allowed it in order to keep things running properly. Velohi, but Gemara rejects Ravina's idea. Yisrael asi l'chal shlichus. A minor, he's eventually going to become, he's going to become Jewish, right? He's already Jewish. He's going to become a person who has agency and ownership in Jewish law. Akum lo asi l'chal shlichus. So you could say that the rabbis extended him the courtesy of, when necessary, that even before he reaches that age, he can appoint a shaliach. But a non-Jew who's never going to become Jewish, I mean, unless he converts, but we're talking about the general case, we can assume that a non-Jew will always remain a non-Jew. So you would not say that the rabbis extended him the courtesy of shlichus. So we don't accept Ravina's answer either. And we will stop for today. And
Do we say that? Why do we say in the other direction that we can be a shaliach for the non-Jew or not?
no, we're saying that if
Either way, it
you're
doesn't
allowing
work.
shlichus, then it works both ways.
But if we're not allowing it, then we cannot. Then we don't allow a Jew to be a shaliach for the nachri either, right?
Right.
So what is the maskana then? Do we allow it? Does a goy have shlichut or not?
Yes. Yes, from Gamatem. Right, I think yes. Yeah, because it's only Rav Ashi who thinks a non-Jew doesn't have shlichus. No, wait a minute. Wait.
Well, Ravina says
Rav
that too,
Ashi-
right?
it's only, yeah, and we reject Ravina also. Yeah, but wait a minute. But Rav Ashi is distinguishing between truma and everything else. So just a minute. Let me hold on for 1 second. No, okay. Okay, I misspoke. So actually, there is no, actually, you could say in general, there's no shlichus for a nachri. And you don't distinguish between truma and anything else. Um, and the case of the transfer of the loan is not shlichus because we're attributing it to a case where it first goes back to the non-Jew and then he lends it out again. And we're only dealing with like, why do we even have to say that?
Well, that case wasn't shlichut from a nachri. The Jew gave it to another Jew. That was our right. But then ultimately we said it went back to the nachri. So there was one Jew met another Jew, and each sort of he wanted to transfer that agreement. So there wasn't shlichut between a Jew and a
Yeah,
non-Jew.
if the agreement is transferred, then it's like then that's not allowed, right? Because then it's like you're paying interest essentially to the first borrower who is Jewish, right? But if it was first returned to or put on the ground in front of the original lender who is not Jewish, and then he turns around and lends it to the second person, so we're saying that is okay,
Right. But now,
and we don't consider it a case of shlichus.
well, but those are two Jews, two Jewish
Yeah,
borrowers.
yeah, but one would be acting on behalf of the non-Jew.
Oh, so that
Like,
would be a case of shlichut from a not from an that the
right.
Jew is acting as a shliach for
For the
the
non-Jew. I
non-Jew.
mean, the non-Jew is the main party here. He's the guy who has the money, right? Who
Right.
lent the
So that would be, so to speak, we it would look like a case of a Jew acting as a shliach for a non-Jew. But we're asking the question now: can a non-Jew be a shliach for a Jew? Right? Isn't that that's just the opposite, right?
Well, yeah, but we've established that if you allow it one way, you allow it the other way. Only Rav Ashi or Ravina, who we reject, say that there might be a distinction. Either there is shlichus or there isn't shlichus. And we're saying that yes, there is shlichus for a non-Jew.
There is.
Hmm.
We're saying in the end there is. So therefore, the non-Jew can act as a shliach for the Jew, and the Jew can act as a shliach for a non-Jew.
Right, and that's why if you don't involve the original lender, but you just transfer the loan to another Jew, then you're paying him interest effectively to the other Jew. So the only way it's permissible is if you actually give it back to the lender and the lender turns around and relends it with interest. And that's okay because because there's no Jew involved in the paying of interest.
But we didn't we just say that shlichut is allowed?
Okay, so
So then in that case, if it is allowed, then
but
seemingly
there's no shlichus. Then there's no shlichus. In the case where A gives it back to the lender and the lender gives it to B, lends it to B, there's no shlichus. Everything is done directly.
correct. But if we're saying that shlichut is a permitted according to the Torah, then
Hmm.
if that's what we're saying, that it is permitted both ways, then in that scenario, it should be permitted for the Jew to give it to another Jew.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Maybe you're right. Um,
We're saying it's not permitted. He has to give it back to the lender. He puts it on the ground or whatever. But if we're saying that shlichut is permitted, if that is the final maskana, then then it should be permitted for the Jew A to give it to Jew B, and Jew B assumes the loan that was originally given to A from the non-Jewish lender.
Actually, yeah, this sounds like that sounds right.
But we're saying it's not permitted. He has to actually give it back to him and put it on the ground.
Um,
So maybe it's not permitted. Shlichut is not permitted from a Jew to a non-Jew or vice versa. All right. That's
mm, so there is shlichus. Okay, right. So if there is shlichus, so I think you're saying right. If there is shlichus, then it's okay for the for Jew A to transfer the loan to Jew B as the shliach of the lender. Um,
But
okay, and then so the second case of the bride, so where the uh yeah, so that's why now I'm forgetting what the Bryce even said. Hang on a second.
was that
Um,
mutter or asur? No, I don't remember.
let me just look back at the Bryce. 1 second. Um, okay, so Hanachi, I saw love him. Maybe to be because I was on the name on okay, so Usher.
I think that's asur.
Yeah.
That is asur. But im hamido eats a goy, whether that's putting on the
Mhm.
ground, give it that is mutar. So that would
Yeah. So
suggest
why
that
is it
shlichut
Usher?
is not permitted.
Um. mhm. Yeah. Right. That's what we asked. So. Okay. Right. So the only way it would be permitted then, that's what we were saying, the only way it would be permitted is if the money were first returned to the to the non-Jew,
Right.
to the lender, right? Because otherwise,
So that would suggest there's no shlichut from a goy to a Jew or a
right,
Jew to a goy.
yes, right. Right, the assumption is ein shlichus l'nachri, so I've been saying it wrong all along, yeah. Um, Okay, so we go with Ein Shlichus L'Nachri, so then it all comes out okay, because so since Ein Shlichus L'Nachri, you're essentially paying the interest to the first borrower who's Jewish. Um, and the only way that can be permitted is if you first return it to the Nachri, to the lender, and he turns around and lends it out again.
Right. So and then in general there ain't shlichus between a Jew and a non-Jew.
Yeah, you are correct. Yeah, yeah, you're correct.
And all this Rav Ashi wanted to say there is that or no?
Yeah, unless you wanted to say, oh, really, there is shlichus in general, just not for truma, and we reject that. And we say, no, there is no shlichus ever.
Period. That's it. There is no shlichus between a Jew and a non-Jew.
Right. That appears to be correct. Yeah. Thank you for correcting the record there.
So how does that work out today? I mean, we certainly don't we tell it in business today?
Yeah.
Don't you tell it if a person is working in general in business and he tells he does a bank deal, he does this deal, that deal, and he gives the money to an achri or he gets someone to sell it for him. Isn't there commerce between Jews and non-Jews today? Where you ask the non-Jew to be a shaliach for you in X, Y, and Z?
Yeah. No, so maybe that's a good question. I mean, but we don't have jurisdiction over Halacha doesn't have really jurisdiction over those transactions. Like it's not that you're forbidden to deal with non-Jews. It's that from a halachic perspective, we don't consider that to be a valid action. But like, is that a problem?
I
I
don't
don't
know.
know. This beyond. I haven't really thought about that. I'm sure there's a lot written about that, but I don't know anything about it.
I mean, people do hire non-Jews to work for them, right?
Yeah. So are you? I mean, okay, that's different than shlichus.
Okay, I understand, but I mean, so he says instead of paying him, he says go bring this uh, uh, document to my neighbor or something. I mean,
Yeah, I don't know. I have no background in this. I really don't know, but it's worth looking into if you're interested,
All right.
but just not through me because I don't know. All right. Have a good day.
Have a good
See you
day.
tomorrow.